This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
The blank page used to be where creative work began. Now, if you use Claude Design, it might begin with a blank prompt box. A marketer can prototype an internal tool without waiting for engineering. An operations team can transform a clunky spreadsheet into an interactive decision-making experience. Or just a sales leader can turn scattered notes into a polished customer presentation. Claude Design is becoming less of a visual novelty and more of a bridge between an idea and a working artifact. And if you haven't used Claude Design, or maybe you haven't been keeping up, then today's AI at Work on Wednesday is definitely for you. Today, we're separating the genuinely useful capabilities in Claude Design from the features that merely look impressive in a demo. So let's get into it. If you're new here, well, here's the big picture. Claude Design is more than image generation. It's a complete design system, an editable canvas, and real handoff from idea to execution. Some big updates also landed that I think have kind of flown under the radar. In June, Anthropic brought in connected brand, direct editing, and a better connection with Claude Code. And then just in the last couple of hours, Anthropic actually added public publishing, better exports, and practical workflow fixes. And we're going to show you a little bit of all of those things. So stick with us for the next 25 or so minutes. And here's what you're going to learn on today's show. You're going to know what Claude Design is and what actually changed in June and July. You're going to see how the workflow runs from design system to editable output. And I'm going to give you at the end our very 5 best practices shown live here for getting the best results. All right, let's get into it. Welcome to Everyday AI. My name is Jordan Wilson, and if you're new here, well, we do this every single day, whether I'm in Chicago or traveling like I am today. This is your unedited, unscripted, daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping business leaders like you and me keep up with all of the nonstop AI updates. I tell you what matters, what doesn't. You use that information to grow your company and your career. So if you haven't already, please make sure to go sign up for our free daily newsletter at youreverydayai.com. All right. So Claude Design, I think when it first was launched, there was rightfully so a lot of talk and a lot of hype around it. Since then, though, I haven't seen hardly anything. And here's the reality. I think when Claude Design came out, it was, I won't say a novelty because it definitely gave great outputs and great designs. But where it was when it was first announced and where it is today, that's just two completely separate stories. And it's actually kind of a bad thing that all the updates that Anthropic has made to Claude Design have largely gone unnoticed because there was the kind of initial hype and the big splash of the initial launch of Claude Design, which when it came out, it was so slow. It was so token intensive. And now those things are actually much better. I actually wanted to demo Claude Design when it first came out, but for a live demo, and, just so everyone knows, I'm on a $200 max plan. In a lot of my early testing when Claude Design first came out, I couldn't even complete one basic design. I hit my rate limits with a $200 a month plan, and it was way too slow. So luckily, Anthropic has fixed those things, and we'll actually be able to look at a thing or two here live. So let's just do it live. So for our live stream audience, you'll be able to see this. Let me know if you have my screen. For our podcast audience, on Wednesdays, we do kind of our AI at Work on Wednesdays, which is normally kind of like a hands-on demo. Sometimes they go really well, sometimes they don't. But either way, you can always check out the video version of the podcast on our website at youreverydayai.com, or you can just check out the show notes of the podcast and we will directly link you to that page. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a try. And yes, if you're wondering, Claude Design did make my normal live stream art here. So normally I do that, but today it was Claude Design. So, all right, let's make sure I get the correct window here before we get started. And just so you know, you do need to have a paid plan for Claude Design. And it is available now, which is great. It is available via desktop and on the web, whereas previously it was only available via the web. So now I am in my Claude account on the web, and the design is a dedicated tab, usually in the lower left-hand corner of your kind of UX. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and click on that. And let me quickly walk you through what you have here, kind of in the main home screen of Claude Design, because there's a lot of different things you can design. Right? Starting with the templates, I think is always a good idea. The templates that Claude suggests are mobile app design, slides, documents, wireframes, animation, UI mockups, resume, 3D object, research, HTML email, color and type pairing, diagram, flyer. So I wouldn't quite think of this like a Canva or something like that, right? Because it's not really where you're going to click a template and then you're going to have like a draggable, whizzy wag, what you see is what you get interface. It's not really like that. Think of all the power of Claude um, helping you design things and being able to iterate in natural language along the process. So let's go ahead. I have an example here. But first, let me talk about some of the functionality, regardless of which of these slides or which of these templates you may choose. So you can start with different types of inputs. You can attach a file. You can attach a folder on your computer. You can connect your GitHub account. I have my GitHub accounts connected. So, if you are kind of, vibe coding different apps for yourself or for your team, you can actually connect it directly with Claude Code and GitHub, which makes the process much easier. You can also upload a Figma file, which is a little newer. You can create an entire design system. I'm not going to be doing that, but that's how you can, similar to if you have used Canva before, you kind of have a brand kit. That's very similar. Setting up a design system is much more robust than a brand kit. So it's more than just about, colors and typography. It's really just every single element that makes a good design great. So those are different starting points. And then you can, like I said, create a template, or you can work with a code base. But in this case, I'm doing none of these. I'm just going to start with a prompt. So I'm going to get this going. I am going to use, what am I going to use? I'm trying to think what we can actually get to in a live demo, already being 8 minutes in. I wanted to use, okay, let's use Fable, but we're only going to go medium. So hopefully it should be a little fast and hopefully I won't hit my limits. All right. So my prompt here is very simple. I said, I want to reimagine the user interface, user experience for each episode page on the Everyday AI website. Please give me 3 different examples. And then I left a link to yesterday's show. All right. So the great thing here, if you've never used Claude Design, is it should feel pretty familiar to anything Claude. So even though it is in kind of its own dedicated interface, right? You're not using this in the normal, Claude chatbot. Claude Design is its own section. It should be very familiar if you've used Claude or any just AI tool, if I'm being honest. So right away, we are greeted with questions. And this is actually the big unlock that I think makes Claude Design really worth using. Even for me, right? I use Claude Design, not a ton. I do use it sometimes, but I lean a little bit more heavily into the combination of GPT Images 2, Inside Codex, and also Google Stitch. But one thing that Claude Design does better than both of those is exactly what you're seeing now. And this is kind of like we'll call it the visual onboarding process. So before I get started, Claude comes back and asks me about a handful of questions on what it wants me to do. So before it just starts designing anything, based on my prompt and based on what it found on the website, it's going out and doing these things. And it says, Claude has some questions. So I'm going to go through these quickly, but it says quick questions before I design 3 episode page concepts. So it says primary goal of the episode page. What should a visitor do? And the good thing here is I don't have to type to Claude. I don't. I have the option. There's an other box where I can type something, but for the most part, looking at my request, it went and looked at the episode page as well. I can look at that by looking at kind of the chain of thought to see what it did. It's asking me very, very specific questions based on my prompt and the work that it did, which this right here, sometimes I'll literally just do this part in Claude Design and use whatever it takes, and then take it into, into GPT images too, or into Google Stitch. So sometimes for me, it's just worth going through this process because it's like you're working with a professional designer. You go in there with a brief and you're like, this is what I want. And they're going to look at it and be like, well, are you sure? Or did you think about all these things? Whereas, some of the other systems I think don't do a good job at this, which is where I think Claude Design really thrives. All right, so let's go answer the questions. It says primary goal of the episode page, and I can select multiple of them. So I'm going to say, the main goals are to listen and watch the episode and to explore more episodes. So yeah, if you didn't know, every single episode, all 800 and I don't know what we're on, 830 some episodes that we have, each one has a dedicated episode page on our website, and you can go watch the video version or listen to the podcast version. And there's a lot of written content on there as well. All right, so next it says visual direction. So I can keep the everyday AI branding, which is interesting because it found yellow and navy, which we don't have yellow and navy. So that was a little error, but not a big deal because I could correct that if I needed to. But I'm just going to say for this one, evolve the brand, fresher but recognizable. All right, it said, how should audio video be handled? I'm going to say I actually don't know. It's saying a big sticky player up top, floating mini player that allows scroll. I'm just going to say decide for me because some of these things that'll give you great options and you can select multiple. A lot of times I'll ultimately just say decide for me, or I'll just type a little note. All right, transcript treatment. I'm going to say collapsible, expandable section. What content matters most? So I'm going to say, ooh, this is a good one. I'm going to say the topics. Actually, don't know. So I'm going to say, I'm going to type in this one. I'm going to say watching the video or listening to the podcast itself. All right, and then it says design for desktop first, mobile first, both equally. Decide for me. I'm going to click decide for me. And then it said vibe of the 3 explorations, 3 safe variations on one direction, 1 safe, 1 evolved, 1 wild, 3 very different directions, or decide for me. I'm clicking the 1 safe, 1 evolved, and 1 wild. And then in this part here, which I love, I don't think Claude Design did this when it was first released. At this point, it's asking me for brand assets or screenshots. I'm not going to go through and do that. But that's nice they have that. And then it says anything you hate about the current page or must keeps. And I'm just going to say it feels too busy. All right. All right, I'm going to click go. So now we have Fable 5 on medium setting going through and cooking this up. And I do already have some examples of this done, which I'm going to hopefully over the next 5 or 10 minutes, it's going to build it itself. So the cool thing here, as our live stream or video audience can see, it's going to build it live. All right. So I can already see it's starting on design 1A, which it says is the safe version, the cleaned up refresh with a similar structure and current brand tidied up. All right. So the cool thing is, as it goes along, I don't have to wait for it to be done. And luckily, it is much faster than it used to be, because when they first launched this, it was super popular. It went viral and it was painfully slow for the first couple of weeks. So slow, in fact, that even though I wanted to really use it, I literally couldn't, between the limits and just how slow it was. But it's much better and faster now. So a couple of other things to keep in mind as we kind of watch Claude Design here live is there is also an annotate button. So there's a comment button up top. I can click that. I can click on any single element that I want to and have it change it. So yeah, I don't have to wait for it to finish. I can do that kind of as we go along. So like I said, keep in mind, even though it is faster, it is still not super fast, right? Especially if you have used a similar product. I'd say the closest product in terms of features and functionality is probably Google Stitch, which I absolutely love. Google Stitch is much faster, but I think Claude Design, just through that onboarding process, ultimately, if I was to use the exact same prompt in the 3 different versions, right? If I were to use it in Claude Design, Google Stitch, and a combination of just, codecs using GPT image and then codecs itself to build everything. I think ultimately, if I were to zero shot this, give a prompt, nothing else, I think Claude Design is probably going to do the best. Not because it's the best at designing something, but actually it's just the best at building that bridge and actually asking you some of those important questions. All right, so as Claude keeps going, let's go back to our slides and talk real quick about some of the basics. So Claude Design launched in April, and for the most part, there weren't a lot of at least public updates until this summer. So in June, they announced the design systems and direct editing and the Claude Code Sync, which is huge. And this in July so far, they've announced public artifacts, new export options, and some workflow fixes. So to zoom out again, don't think of Claude Design as an image generator. Don't think of it as a Canva replacement either. I think, like I said earlier, the best way to think and to use Claude Design is to use natural language or any inputs that you currently have. So uploading, maybe you have a mock-up that you designed in Canva and you want to turn it into a wireframe, you want to turn it into a mobile app, or maybe you just have some inspiration that you've collected throughout the internet and you have some screenshots of those things. Where I think you get the most, even for non-technical, non-designers, where you get the most out of it is just moving from that idea or a starting point of a screenshot or a design to at least an artifact that works, right? So I think it's really about breaking it into three systems. I say it's your brief, it's the system itself, and then the artifact. So going through Claude Design, going through the goal, the audience, the content, and the layout, then the system, right? That's your brand rules, your assets, and your components that you upload. In this case, in my demo case, I didn't do any of that just for speed. And then last is the artifact, what you actually want it to design. So that can be a prototype, a deck, animation, one pager, etc. And the great thing is just the amount of control that you have throughout the process. So even though it is time consuming, the combination of being able to not just upload assets before you start, but also when Claude comes back and asks you questions, the ability to iterate and also upload new files there. And then as you go along, there is just a ton of different control. And then actually when we're done as well, I'll show you some other things that you can do besides annotation. And then the handoff, right? You're not just left with an HTML file and you're not just left with, something that you export. There's a lot of different options as well. So, you can publish it as an artifact. You can, as a PNG, as an HTML file, as a zip, right? As a PowerPoint. The other cool things is like I said, you can now send it directly into Claude Code, which there's some caveats. Sometimes in my experience, it seems like it just sends in an HTML file. Maybe there's something I'm not doing correctly there. But the other thing that I really like is you can send a project straight into Canva, or you can send it straight into Gamma as well. So maybe if you do have a lot of your, images or just other, maybe you're just more comfortable like me. I usually work in Canva a ton, being able to start something and going through that design iteration process with Claude Code and then being able to finish it in Canva is a real unlock for me. So then, like I said, being able to publish it, export it as HTML, MP4. Yes, Claude does create videos. Are they Claude Design? Are they great? No, they're not. You can actually get much better kind of video out of Claude if you're using, an MCP for like remotion or something like that. So that was actually the thing I was most shocked by when Claude Design came out, because I don't even think they mentioned that you could do animations and videos. And then I was like, wait, you can do animations and videos, which is really cool. But, ultimately, Claude Design just really helps you work faster, and then stay consistent with the built-in brand systems. So let's go ahead and skip forward here and talk about the best way to get started. I didn't do this, but you're always going to have the best results when you do import your own system. All right. And the great thing is you can actually create that in another Claude Design file. You can say, I don't have a design system, or you might say like, what the heck is that? But essentially that's going to define to a T, right? Even down to things like rounded corners, spacing, typography, height, all these different things that you really want control over. Because the thing that people need to understand, generative AI ultimately is generative, right? So that means you could go and run the exact same prompt inside Claude Design, even if you have a brand kit, and you're going to get wildly different things each time. So the tighter that design system is, it actually, I won't say it restricts the nature of a generative engine, but it does just give it much stricter, essentially prompt adherence requirements, that it's not going to go and create these very different things. So if you do need something that you reproduce, let's say every week, or like me, right? Like every single day, right? I create slides inside of Canva, right? For me, it's easier to do it that way. Yes, I could just hand that off to Claude Design, or to Codex with GPT image and create PDFs. It's still, for me, that's a way I learn, right? I like to put things on the page and rearrange slides, rearrange bullet points. That helps me present a little bit better. As an example, maybe my presentation today isn't as good because I handed that off to Claude Design. All right. Let's go ahead and skip and talk a little bit here that it's much different than Canva or Figma. All right, so I already talked about some of the differences, but kind of the strengths with Claude Design and how it's different from a typical non chat interface design tool is it's conversation first, right? And then being able to ground your design in the design system that you upgrade. And then the huge unlock, right, is then being able to send this straight into Claude Code itself. So in the same way, again, I think probably the single closest competitor to Claude Design is Google Stitch. So in the same way, you can do a similar thing in Google Stitch. It uses Nano Banana. So that's a big unlock with Google Stitch versus Claude Design. A big downside of Claude Design is it's not an image generator, right? Claude itself does not generate images. It can, kind of create, some nice typography, and it can give you good designs. But ultimately, the best design obviously has images, right? So you're not going to see that in Claude Design, where you obviously can get that a little bit more easier in Google Stitch, or in Canva and Figma. You do get more of that. Here's all my brand assets. I can easily drag them in, move them around. That's not really what Claude Design is set up for now. Although I do assume that Anthropic may kind of add some of those more what you see is what you get features in the future, as they continue to add and actually pick up steam in updating Claude Design. But yeah, this is just very strong for exploration and repeatable first drafts. Whereas, Canva, Figma, this is more just for manual creation and collaboration, deeper publishing or product design workflows. And it's just stronger. I think Canva or Figma are stronger when precision and multiplayer editing is needed. All right. So let's just go ahead and get straight into our 5 best practices, and then we're going to wrap and look at our final design. And I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do once you have finished your design. So 5 best practices for working with Claude Design. Number 1, start with the audience and the outcome. Tell Claude who it's for and what they should do next, right? So whether you do that just typing, whether you give it an example of your current audience, whatever it is, always giving Claude the example of your audience and the outcome is going to help Claude Design come back with those better questions. Those questions that it asks you, right? Sometimes they're just very design specific. And that was probably more of the example that I gave here, because I didn't go through and give the audience and the outcome, because I wanted to give a very beginner friendly, not having to be a novice at Claude Design to get some of the outputs, but it's always best to start with the audience and the outcome. Number 2, provide real source material. So my example, I give a URL, but it's always going to be better if you upload. If you currently have a brand guideline, upload that. If you have images, upload those things. Data, right? If you're creating an app, whatever it is, you should always be providing real source material first. As much information as you can give Claude Design up front, it's going to save you a lot of time going back and forth. Next, build one section at a time. Approve the structure first, then you can refine the visuals and the wording. So yeah, let's just say that you want to design an entire workflow for a new app. right? Work on one section at a time. Don't just give a broad prompt to Claude and say, hey, I want an entire app. Break it down into pieces. In the same way that you used to think of, think step by step used to be one of those, keywords for, the prompt engineering days of 2023. I think thinking like that and using Claude Design like that is going to give you better results. Number 4, give specific revision instructions. Say exactly what to keep, remove, emphasize, or visually change. And I think it does make it easier in Claude Design doing that with the kind of comment or annotate feature. And then last but not least, number 5, export and inspect everything. All right, especially if you are ultimately pushing this out as code, right? If you miss, something simple, like an example that I did, I used Claude Code, or sorry, Claude Design for a project that I was building in Codex. This was before the GPT 5.6 update, where I think, OpenAI got much better at front end design. But before that, I was using Claude Design a lot to, start before I gave a project to Codex to build. And one thing I noticed is, I went through and I'm like, okay, yeah, this looks good from Claude. Let me go ahead and export this over to Codex and start building. And then I realized, going back and looking at things like typography, spacing, looking at, making sure all corners were consistently rounded across different elements. There are some certain details that I should have either better prompted in Claude Design, or before I kicked that over to Codex, I should have been a little bit more, had my inspector eye on versus just a vibe, right? The vibe was, this looks great. And, Codex did a great job with it. But if I would have inspected it, I could have saw that there was some minor flaws. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's see how we did in our 5 designs. All right, I did give it a good, about 15 or so minutes. So hopefully it's done, but we'll see. All right.
Are you still running in circles trying to figure out how to actually grow your business with AI? Maybe your company has been tinkering with large language models for a year or more, but can't really get traction to find ROI on Gen AI. Hey, this is Jordan Wilson, host of this very podcast. Companies like Adobe, Microsoft, and NVIDIA have partnered with us because they trust our expertise in educating the masses around generative AI to get ahead. And some of the most innovative companies in the country hire us to help with their AI strategy and to train hundreds of their employees on how to use Gen AI. So whether you're looking for ChatGPT training for thousands or just need help building your front-end AI strategy, you can partner with us too, just like some of the biggest companies in the world do. Go to youreverydayai.com/partner to get in contact with our team, or you can just click on the partner section of our website. We'll help you stop running in those AI circles and help get your team ahead and build a straight path to ROI on Gen AI.
So I am now back in Claude Design. I'm going to zoom out for our live stream audience here. And I do, let me scroll down. It did say it's done. So see exactly how long, I don't know how long it worked. But the good thing is we have 3 different designs. So as I zoom out here, we can kind of see them. The canvas, if you've ever used something like Figma, it is very easy to use because you can edit the design directly, right? So in this first example, it gave me a headline. If I want to change the headline, you do have some elements of kind of like what you see is what you get editor, because you can click on anything and you can, edit it just as you're typing, right? But it's not a true, being able to move things around. You can, but it's ultimately going to break your design, right? Like I can, resize this embed, but it's not the full embed, right? A lot of times it's easier to make these edits either just chatting to Claude. So there is an edit mode. All right. So if you're in edit mode, that's where you kind of have that granular control and you can click on anything and change it live, or you can just stay in kind of chat mode and you can describe the changes that you want Claude Design to create and it'll do that. Or you can go up and go into comment mode. So in there, I can, essentially click on any single element and just then leave a comment and send to Claude. So essentially, there's like 3.5 different ways that you can iterate on the design. Some are better than others. And it does ultimately depend on what you're trying to do with this, right? Is this just a deck? Right. If it's a deck, maybe it's just best you change it here. Is it something that you're coding in Claude Code? If so, maybe you use the comment or the annotation, or you just chat to Claude Code, especially if you're not a strong coder. You could look at some of the more technical iterations, and you might look at it and be like, wait, I don't even understand, right? Even some of the design stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's super helpful, right? So let me get out of comment mode here. I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to click on this main element. So in the first iteration that it gave me, this is kind of 1A, the safe one. I can click on any element. And if you know the basics of like web design, it's going to give you all of these options as well. So all your divs, your H1 tags, all these different things. In the same way, if you are familiar with web design, it's going to give you those things. So I can go and kind of use some of these tools manually that, in a web design interface, right? If you've used like WordPress or Squarespace or Wix or something like that, you do also have kind of that option to edit as well. All right. So those are some of the more technical aspects, but let's just go ahead and kind of zoom out and ultimately see, how did Claude Design do? All right. So this the first episode page was the safe one. It said it's familiar structure, the current brand tidied. Like I said, this didn't really nail my current brand because it didn't properly bring in the colors. It said that it was yellow. That was not correct. But in terms of how this laid it out, I actually really like it. It has the video front and center. It has chapter markers on the right-hand side. It has like an up next section on right under the chapters, key takeaways, quick buttons to listen on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. So overall, I mean, this is much better than our current website design, right? I'll show everyone that for our live stream audience, right? I mean, we built this originally like 4 years ago. So, our current website design, it's super busy, right? It's this dark mode with white font. Personally, I think when we launched it, I was like, this is good enough. I didn't really care as much. Now looking back at it, I'm like, this is super busy. So, I mean, just in that example, and I remember our team spent a lot of time when we initially put this together. Part of it is, design trends change, and even web design capabilities change. Changing certain things on here used to take a long time. I could export this as HTML and get it up on the site, pretty quickly. I'm not actually going to do that, but it's possible. All right, let's look at option B. Option B is evolved. This is, it says the editorial daily briefing feel, a serif recap, synced chapter player. So a little bit different, but it essentially made the video a little bit smaller. It does have definitely more of an editorial feel. Live stream audience, as I go along, which one do you like? Do you like 1A so far? Do you like 1B? So far, I like this 1B version a little bit better. It makes the video a little smaller. I don't think the video would need to be super huge, right? The value of this podcast, I don't think, is necessarily the what I'm showing on video, aside from Wednesday episodes, which obviously the video is important, but otherwise, it's just kind of my notes on the screen. So option B looks pretty good. Similar overall style, but let's go to option 1C, which is wild. So here it says dark broadcast console, full bleed player. There's a ticker and a live feel. So I don't hate this one, right? It has a ticker at the top. Yeah, this to me looks like I don't know if you're watching, ESPN Live or something like this. This looks like a live broadcast. 100% of the focus is on this full bleed episode video. Less of an emphasis on the actual written content, summaries, chapter takeaways, those kind of things. This is like if you're just going to want to digest as much video as possible. All right. So that's the process. Like I said, everything else up here, being able to leave the comments. So let's just say, I can click this bar and I can say, make the bar, neon blue so it stands out more, right? All I have to do, click that, send a Claude code, and then you can see down here, it's already working on that. So without having to redo the whole design, that's just a very quick way to iterate. And it's already done, right? So bless up that, Claude Design is actually faster now, and you can just iterate on small things because, yeah, when it first came out, doing some simple iterations like that used to be a lot more time consuming, but now it's done, right? And I, can go through and change things just like that. There is a tweaks section, which is very similar. I don't even fully, understand this tweaks section up here, but you can just click the ideas and it's just going to give you different ideas based on what it created anyways. All right. Then last, there are some presentation options. You can present in Claude Design as well. We already went through the editing and then the sharing. So I can publish this as an artifact, a PNG, an HTML, or a zip file. I can send it to Claude Code, PowerPoint, Canva, Gamma, video, or PDF. And then I can also share this link with my team. All right. So that is a wrap, y'all. A lot to cover. But overall, I think the thing to keep in mind, even though Claude Design, right, the big downside is there's no image generation, right? And I think most great designs obviously have images, which at least for me and my purposes is maybe one reason I don't use it a lot. So yes, you can obviously upload images, but at least when my mind is thinking, I'm going to vibe a design, I don't necessarily always want to, create my own assets or bring in my own assets or, for me, I love using Google Stitch for this. A big unlock that people don't realize is, inside Codex using GPT image and just, I have a skill that can create an entire deck, including images on the inside. But I think where Claude Design really thrives is getting it from idea to actually a working artifact on screen. And it does a really good job. And obviously, the more time and care you put in, the better the results are going to be. So that's a wrap for today's AI Working Wednesday. Now you know the basics of Claude Design. If you want to see more on Claude Design in the future, let me know. And also, what was your favorite design? I think I kind of liked 1B, although that wild version was kind of fun to look at. All right, so thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, please go to youreverydayai.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.